Of course, today in Canada, it's our inaugural day of reflection around truth and reconciliation. And so it hopefully you've had some time today, an opportunity to maybe think about your own role in sort of the historic and maybe the continued relationship that you have with Indigenous peoples, and hopefully we can continue to come up with better ideas on how we can address some of the continued discrimination around Indigenous peoples in the cannabis space as well. So I hope that this day has been one that has a lot of introspection, that we can work towards creating a better society. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. And throughout this whole presentation, there is a Q&A spot on the Zoom webinar where you can continue to ask questions. But for the most part, there'll be a short little presentation, and then we'll have an open discussion. So our guest today is Troy Henderson, and Troy's going to do an incredible job of making cleaning and sanitation sexy. It's typically not the type of topic that you know, when you compare it to like nutrients or lighting or genetics, you know, it doesn't seem to get the same level of excitement. But arguably, it's far more important than any of those. When it comes to the regulated cannabis space, and to be fair, even to the hobbyist growers, cleaning and sanitation is a make or break for not only your yields, your quality, but also your quality, right? So you can have tremendous positive results by actually having an incredibly clean environment. I also just, you know, before I turn it, so Troy, terrible introduction, sorry, Troy. But Troy is kind of the go-to person when it comes to working with cannabis LPs. He works as a consultant, the cannabis licensed producer consultant for Virox Technologies, based out of Ontario. The product in particular is called Shield, and he'll be speaking to that. But I also just wanted to mention that Shield is the official sponsor at the Grow Up Conference when it comes to cleaning and sanitation and disinfection. So it's Troy's responsibility to make us all safe at that Grow Up Conference. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Troy. Welcome, Troy, and thank you.
Thank you very much for the intro, Av. I'm just going to share my screen here for the presentation. And all right, should be good. I think everyone can see this. So yeah, thank you very much. And as I've mentioned there, we are donating some product on behalf of Growhouse is actually donating our product on behalf of us to keep everyone safe at the show. So you'll learn a little bit about our products, and you'll also see them while you're attending the show. So a little bit about me. I graduated from McMaster University in biotechnology. I spent 5 years at Virox in various roles, kind of starting in R&D and quality assurance and working my way to where I am now. And I've implemented Shield in probably about 125 facilities across Canada. And it's more than just selling a product, kind of, you know, where the consulting part comes in. There's a lot more to it. There's SOP writing and revisions, you know, ongoing process development, employee training, trials, and all of that. So I really help a lot of LPs adopt the product, implement it into their facilities to the optimum level. A little bit about Virox. So as I've mentioned, we are in Ontario, just outside of Toronto and Oakville, and we're really recognized as experts across the globe in different markets. And a lot of it is, you know, all of it's around our accelerated hydrogen peroxide technology, which is what you will find in Shield and all of our products. And not going to spend too much time talking about our products, but in general, you know, these products are really safe to use. They have fast contact times, and they are approved by Health Canada specifically for use in cannabis facilities. So I always like starting these off with kind of getting a good glimpse of why sanitation is important. I know a lot of us understand, it is in order to be compliant, you need to do that, but there's other things too. And I like kind of what Av said in the intro there, speaking to quality. Sanitation directly impacts your quality. If your plants are fighting an outbreak the whole time, they're not going to produce that yield or the trichrome density or whatever it is that you're looking for. Even if you do successfully grow a crop with subpar sanitation, you might then be faced with irradiation or other post-harvest remediation techniques, which a lot of them are shown to reduce the quality of the product, especially in the trichromes and the terpenes. So that's something you want to consider, and also the yield as well. If you're losing 40% of your crops to outbreaks every time, sanitation can directly help you protect those plants and increase your yield, or even just protect your yield, where that's where shield comes from, shield your yield. And then lastly, kind of, more on topic, maybe approaching to be off topic, is preventing outbreaks for your people and staff, like coronavirus, right? You want to make sure that there's no even flu going around your facility. So today we're going to be talking about disinfectants, but I kind of wanted to give everyone just a brief overview of the different types of products you might be seeing in your facility. So you're going to have first kind of the degreasers and detergents, which is kind of generally referred to as cleaners. So these are not regulated by Health Canada, and really the only part of interest for cannabis growers is that there's no residual contamination that's going to hit the end product. So if you're using a cleaner on a cannabis contact surface, you have to rinse. For disinfectants, they are heavily regulated by Health Canada and the Food and Drug Act, and they will all carry a DIN number, or a drug identification number. So under disinfectants, you're going to have sanitizers as well, and we'll speak to the differences of those shortly. Then lastly, we have pesticides, which are very regulated as well, and they carry a PCP number. So if you're looking to use a pesticide or anything for foliar spray, make sure it has that PCP number and it's approved for use on or in cannabis. So the differences, sanitizing, disinfecting, kind of is all interchanged, but they are different. So sanitizing, or a sanitizer, is just reducing the level of microorganisms present to an acceptable level. So you're looking at a 3-log reduction here, and it's only against bacteria. You can't sanitize viruses or fungi as per Health Canada. So if you had 100,000 bacteria on the surface, you'd be left with 100 with that 3-log reduction. So there is a reduction. It's enough to be safe, but it's not quite enough for your high-risk areas where you want that number to be as low as possible. And that's where your disinfectant or your disinfecting step would come into place. So disinfecting, similar to sanitizing, you are killing microorganisms. However, you're now including bacteria, viruses, fungus, mycobacteria, kind of a lot more scope there. And it's a 5-log reduction. So if you're starting with that same 100,000, let's say, bacteria on the surface, you're only left with 1. And that is a significantly lower. If you think about doubling time, if the doubling time was 3 minutes, after sanitizing, you have 200 left, whereas after disinfecting, you only have 2. So it is, in your high risk areas, anywhere where there's cannabis or cultivation activity happening, you want to be disinfecting, and you want to make sure it's being done properly. So with that as well, another really important thing you want to consider is the contact time of your products. And I'm kind of going over kind of the 3 most important metrics when you're looking at disinfectants now, then we're going to go over the rest of them after this. So contact time is the amount of time the disinfectant needs on the surface in order to ensure the efficacy. So if you have a disinfectant that has a 5-minute contact time against bacteria, you have to make sure that that surface is wet for 5 minutes with that disinfectant in order to achieve that claim. If it dries in 2 minutes, you'll have to reapply 2.5 times in order to make that claim. So what you really want to try to find is products with a realistic contact time, which is when the drying time is longer than the contact time. So you can really achieve disinfection in one application. So this is actually a graphic put out by the CDC, and it's really helping people choose the right disinfectant for their facility. And I'm talking about cannabis right now. This is really applicable to any industry, any user who needs a disinfectant. So when you're looking at your broad spectrum, that's going to be looking at the claims. So I was kind of mentioning bacteria, viruses, fungi. What are you trying to get? And do you have that broad spectrum ability to get rid of it? And we'll talk a little bit more about what that broad spectrum might be and what's included in there in the next couple of slides. Another thing you want to look at, and this is arguably one of the most important, is the fast acting or the contact time of your product. So for example, if you have a 10-minute product or a 10-minute contact time product, there's a very, very good chance that you're not reaching that contact time in one application. You know, water by itself is going to dry in 5 minutes. And if you have your fans on or lights in a room, it's going to dry even faster. So you want to make sure that you're choosing a product and you're really taking the contact time into consideration. You also want to consider how it's affected by environmental factors. So products like alcohol products or chlorine products, they're good disinfectants, but they are extremely impacted by soils or environmental factors. So if anyone's familiar with isopropyl, you are required to pre-clean before disinfecting with it, and that's because if there's any soils on the surface, it will react with those soils and won't do as good of a job against the pathogens that you're trying to kill on the surface. So if you can find a product that is less affected or even not affected at all by those environmental factors, that's going to help you in the long run for sure. You also want to look at the toxicity of the product. And one thing I kind of mentioned throughout this presentation is it's not just because a product is super toxic to the user or maybe the environment doesn't mean that it's good, a really good disinfectant. Or on the flip side, just because you have a really good disinfectant doesn't mean it has to be harmful to the users, the environment, the equipment in your facility. So try to find a product that's non-toxic, or at least try to use your product in a way that makes the toxic effects of it less. So if you have a product that requires a respirator, if you're spraying it, maybe try to not spray that product, or find a product that is a little bit safer to use for spraying. Kind of the same thing with surface compatibility too. Chlorine products, for example, are not compatible with stainless steel. So if you are using a chlorine product on stainless steel, it will start corroding and you'll see rust. And that's obviously not good for just in terms of having to replace your equipment, but the last thing you want is a chip of rust or some kind of corroded metal going into your product and potentially causing a recall. So you really want to make sure that you're picking a product that isn't going to corrode any of your equipment in your facility for many reasons, more than just the replacing of the equipment. So another metric that really isn't as important in cannabis, but it still is something to consider, is the odor of the product. A lot of different industries are really familiar with like the smell of bleach, and like kind of coordinating that with the fact that the room is clean. But the smell of clean is really nothing. So just because if you walk into a room and it smells like isopropyl or it smells like bleach, the room, it could be a sign the room was clean, disinfected, but that's also a sign that you have VOCs in the air that could be potentially toxic. A lot of the times that's what an odor is. So you do want to be considerate of that. An odorless product is usually going to be better than a product with a strong odor. So something to keep in mind, but for cannabis it's not as important because you're not facing consumers or customers, and it is kind of contained in some areas. One that is more important for cannabis is solubility. So you want a product that will be soluble, especially if you're trying to be compliant with the Health Canada regulations. You will be rinsing disinfectants off cannabis contact. What's it called? Like tabletops or whatever. Lost the word there. But if you want a product that is soluble in water so that you can properly rinse from those surfaces. If you have a product that is insoluble with water and you are trying to remove it from a surface, you might have to use something else to actually remove that residue from the surface. So it's always important. It's not going to be something that's make or break, but it will definitely help you. Stability is another one where you want a product that's going to last as long as it can once it's diluted. Some products might only last 2 or 3 days in that bottle once you've diluted it, and that usually ends up either you're wasting some of that product or you end up using product that's past its expiry and it's not going to be as efficacious as you want. So looking for a product that has that longer stability, or creating a program around your product with a shorter stability to ensure that it's changed out on a regular basis.
And Troy, do you want to just give an example? What would be the stability of isopropyl?
Kind of depends. If you're mixing it, buying it, and then like buying it 70% and then putting it into a bottle. But I think the max would be about 5 days. It's usually about 48 hours. So not as not as stable as many other products out there. Shield, for example, is 30 days once diluted, and then 2 years in the drum. So something that we really pride ourselves on is you're not going to be dumping and wasting any of our product.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that a little bit, if you had to dump your isopropyl or had to dump your shield, what's the difference in that?
Shield, there's no environmental concerns when dumping. I believe isopropyl, you will run into issues at a certain quantity. So if you're just doing a little bit, I think you're going to be okay. And it also depends on your location. So always check with your local authorities. But from some of the customers I've worked with, small quantities are okay. But if maybe you find a 5-liter pail that you forgot about, you might have to pay someone to dispose that properly. So kind of similar to that, not affected by environmental factors. There are different types of products, and we're going to kind of go into the differences of those after this, but having cleaning abilities or being a cleaner as well can really cut down on labor. It also kind of reduces that risk of being affected by environmental factors. If you have a product that's a cleaner and a disinfectant, it has some kind of technology in it that allows it to not be affected by those environmental factors, so it's able to remove them and then disinfect the surface. So those products are definitely very popular in the cannabis industry and can save a lot of time really taking a whole step out of your process. So that's something I would definitely look at if you're trying to change your disinfectant or you're just setting up a new facility and you're looking to what to use. Kind of on the point that I've just made, an environmentally friendly product, although it might not be the top of everyone's list, it is nice to have a product that you can safely dispose, doesn't affect water or aqua life. So Shield, for example, is extremely environmentally friendly or readily biodegradable. Many products out there are, but you do want to make sure. We've seen some that they affect fish, for example, in the environment, and you don't want to be dumping that down the drain. So it might add some extra steps in your process when you're done with that product. Obviously, you want the product to be economically friendly, and we have a little calculation here to show kind of the real use costs. And then easy to use. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. There are products out there that you might have a 2-part dilution, so water, 2 chemicals, and you have to wait like 45 minutes before you can use it. And that's just a little bit difficult. So you want it to be as easy as possible to use for everyone in your facility. So we're going to go into a lot of these things in a little bit more detail throughout the rest of the presentation. And then we're going to look at a label to kind of see where you can find some of this information. So on the topic of your broad spectrum or your claims is what we call. So this is what the EPA and Health Canada uses in order to help disinfectant manufacturers achieve these claims. So I kind of use the term bactericidal, for example. So if a disinfectant company will say we wanted to make a product that we could claim against efficacy against all bacteria, it would be impossible for us to go and test every different bacteria that known to man. So what Health Canada and EPA have done is said, okay, we know the families of bacteria, we know the toughest bacteria in each of those families to kill. If you can prove efficacy against each of those, we will give you a claim against all other bacteria. And they've done this for viruses too, done this for fungi, all the way up the list here. So in a cannabis facility, you really do want to go all the way up to your non-envelope viruses. Hop lane environment being out there, you want to have that virucidal ability. But different situations might be different products. A Shield goes all the way up to mycobacteria. But you want to pick the product that has the claims that you're looking for. So if you expect to encounter bacteria, viruses, and fungi, get a product that's fungicidal, bactericidal, and virucidal. And then sometimes there'll be an emerging pathogen where you might not be exactly sure where it fits. You can use this hierarchy of susceptibility to determine if you can expect efficacy with the product you're currently using. Or of course, feel free to reach out to your manufacturer and they can help you. So when I was talking about the cleaning efficacy and products that can clean and disinfect in one step, we're talking about OneStep products and TwoStep products. So a OneStep product, which is like Shield, for example, it will clean and disinfect in one step. Unless the surface is heavily soiled, that's really only an issue really post-harvest. Like your trimming machine, you might have to do a pre-clean before disinfecting there. But for the other 90% of your facility, your floors, walls, ceilings, even your tables, once you do like your dry sweep, you can clean and disinfect in one step, which really cuts half your labor out there. There are other products like the TwoStep products, which are kind of your legacy chemistries, like your alcohols, your chlorines, your quats, some quats now are OneStep, but the TwoStep products, regardless, they do require a pre-clean prior to disinfection, and that's because they are affected by those environmental factors like soils on the surface. So not only does that add an extra step into your process, however, it also adds a little bit more risk because if that first step isn't done properly, the second step can't be done properly. So when possible, it's definitely a good thing to consider a OneStep product. It really goes a long way. So I have a little example here too about calculating cost and use. And this is something that, for us in the industry and working with this a lot, we know our costs and use, we know the competitors, but sometimes the users in the facility, they might just go off, here's a 4-liter jug of one product and a 4-liter jug of another product. This 4 liters cheaper, so we're going to go with that. But in reality, you really want to get the cost per liter in use. And I just have an example here, looking at a shield drum, for example. So, you want to first calculate how many liters of ready-to-use liquid you'd be making at the dilution rate. And in this example, you have 8,200 liters, and then you're just dividing the cost by how many liters you make for that, that size, for example, 200-liter drum. So you get that 32-cent cost per liter in use. And that's the number you want to use to compare if you're comparing the cost of 2 disinfectants. But there's other considerations as well. As I mentioned, the OneStep versus TwoStep products, you'll have some labor cost savings as there. If you are removing the costs of cleaners and detergents, you can factor that in. Costs for storage and disposal. So isopropyl, for example, we know it has to be stored in a fire safety cabinet. Some products you have to pay to dispose, so you could factor that in. And then, as well as the cost for additional PPE or engineering controls like ventilators or, specific HVAC in some rooms to help with the air quality. So now I just want to kind of look at some of the different, so a label. This is our shield label here. I just wanted to kind of show you everyone where you can find some of the information you're going to be looking for. So this is our wipes label here. This is like the printer version of it. So you can see the printer line there. So we have half French, half English. And so first I want to look at where you can find the DIN number. So that would be the front panel of the wipes. And right there you can find the DIN number. So you always want to make sure you're using a product with a DIN number. And kind of over the pandemic, we actually have heard of a lot of US companies launching products into Canada without a DIN number. They're being used. So, even if it's a product that had a DIN number and you've been buying from the same customer, let's say, just make sure that it's the same one. A lot of, the supply and the shipping, it's been tough for a lot of customers. So, make sure you have a DIN number on your product, and you can search that DIN number as well. Health Canada has the drug product database, and there you can search DIN number. You can actually just type in cannabis and see what disinfectants are approved for using cannabis. So that's a good website too if you're in this stage and you're looking for what disinfectant to use. So the next part I want to look at is where you can find the claims, and I'm just looking at the English side right now. The same is on the French side, of course. So here is your claims. So we have a fungicidal at 3 minutes, the bactericidal, virucidal, tuberculocidal, which is all your disinfecting claims. Then we have that broad spectrum sanitizing as well. So you'll notice the contact time is different for disinfecting and sanitizing. As I mentioned, sanitizing a little bit lower level, shorter contact time. So we typically will see customers sanitizing, maybe if they're cleaning their floors maybe 4 to 5 times a day, like a gowning room, sanitizing is a good option there because you're doing it so frequently, you're reducing that number over and over again to an acceptable level. And then you have, of course, your disinfecting claims. And under those, you have a list of some of the pathogens that we've actually tested against using, the Health Canada certified testing labs and the GLP standards. So there you can see the exact pathogens we tested against. That is not a full list. If you are interested to see a full list, I'm sure if you reached out to your disinfectant provider, they can share that with you. We have something called a reference sheet, which is basically everything we'd want to put on the label. So it's approved by Health Canada, all the language on it, but it's everything we want to put on the label, but we don't have room for everything. So it's almost like an extension of the label in a way. The other thing I wanted to point out is kind of the last three. So your precautionary statements there to tell you what PPE you'll be required. In this case, there's none. Some of your storage, your disposal, first aid, that's something you're going to want to read for sure. And I've been in facilities before when we're reviewing what other customers, or sorry, what our client would be using. And it'll say, there was one in particular where I was talking to a woman and it said, right, bold writing right there, known to cause fertility issues in women. And, if she had read that, she would have known right away and been a little bit less terrified probably after I told her that. But nonetheless, it's something that you can learn from. And just to give it a quick read, again, everything on this label has been approved by Health Canada. So it's, we can't really hide anything. We have to disclose any kind of risks that could be there. So give that a read on your product. Another thing we have here, I've pointed out, is the one-step disinfectant cleaner. So we have actually specified that it's a one-step. Most products that are one-step will kind of say that somewhere because it is a really big benefit, but you can always check there. You can also check the use instructions too. It'll say if it needs to be cleaned or not. And then of course we have for use in cannabis facilities as well, which it's a good idea to get a product that's actually designed for your industry. The way that disinfectants work, if we wanted to add a claim, make a new claim, change the label, whatever that would be. If you have a product that's just kind of out there for all industries, it's probably not going to develop with the cannabis industry. Whereas every time there's a new pathogen of concern or maybe a new use instruction we can change this label to reflect that. So this product is constantly evolving with the industry. And lastly, another thing you should look for is the active ingredient that's in the product. So there's many different kind of chemistry classes, I'd say, with disinfectants. You have your quats, your phenols, hydrogen peroxide, chlorine. But it's a good idea to know kind of what class you're in, and you can get a general idea online. Even on the Shield website, we have comparisons of the good and the bad of each of those chemistries. You would also find your WHMIS hazard symbols and hazard statements on here as well. We don't have any on this label, but if you do see a hazard symbol, it's a good idea to understand what that means and ways you can mitigate that risk if you choose to use that product.
Hey, Troy,
yeah.
Sorry, just if you went back to that, you talked a little bit about that one-step process and trying to tie it back into what you had already said earlier about the timing. Can you connect that one step of Shields versus the one step of some of the other, the bleaches, the ISOs, and would you mind defining what quat stands for?
A quat, yeah, quaternary ammonium product. It's just a class. It's a chemistry. A lot of the times you see quats kind of paired now with alcohols, so it's a quat alcohol type product. Sorry, what was so the difference between one step and two step?
No, it was more about Troy knows that I'm incredibly biased towards Shield. I serve as a temporary QA for many LPs as they find a more competent QA. One of my prerequisites is that you have to use the Shield product if you want to hire me. Because this makes my life so much simpler. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about when other people claim a one-step, what's the difference between the Shield one-step versus, say, ISO?
Yeah, well, yeah, ISO would, a quad, yeah, ISO wouldn't be a one-step, it'd be a two-step, like a quad alcohol would be a two-step, or sorry, a one-step could be, but I guess, the main difference with every other one-step product is that we also have that realistic contact time. So if you had another one-step product, like a cleaner disinfectant, let's say, and it had a 10-minute contact time, sure, you are removing that step of cleaning, but you're still going to have to reapply the product multiple times in order to reach that contact time. In this example with the wipes, it's a 3-minute contact time. our products, the active ingredient has hydrogen peroxide, but they're water-based. So again, we're looking at about a 5-minute drying time in ambient environment. So in one step, one wipe, you can clean, disinfect, you can walk away and you're ready to go. And that is really the benefit that we see is, a more real life example. We just did a timed trial with the facility, and they had, I'd say like 30-foot tables maybe in a room. And it was taking them about, they had 4 30-foot tables, and it took them about 8 hours to clean, disinfect the room once the plants were out. And we went in there and with Shield and validating with both micro and ATP, in a quarter of the time, we were able to clean those tables against isopropyl in a cleaner, just because of the fact that you can really just apply it, let it sit, rinse it off, and you're good to go. And you really don't need to rinse. In some scenarios you will, but it really, like for that customer, for example, it went from each room taking 8 hours to 2 hours at most, at the same amount of people. So you can really see the benefit there, and the ATP and micro results were actually better. So it's really a superior product for all of that, and especially for use in the cannabis facilities. But in all honesty, there is still a time and place for products like isopropyl, but we really recommend that more as a cleaner or like a solvent. So when you're in the processing kind of or post-harvest stage of your product, when you have caked on resins on a trimmer or whatnot, everyone knows like alcohol is a really good solvent. So you can still use that to remove those resins. But when you want to disinfect, you can use something like a Shield wipe to quickly disinfect it and have it ready to go.
Yeah, and that's one of the greatest things about the Shield wipes, especially if you're in the trim room and you just want to do a nice little clean of your snips. That Shield wipe is definitely something that isn't going to leave any fibers on the blade. So it's kind of comforting for that QA to know that you're not going to end up getting a little contaminants in your final flower product.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, sorry if you wanted to say more about that, but I also wanted you to just maybe define when you were talking about ATP and micro, if you just want to explain that a little bit in greater detail.
Sure, yeah. So ATP and micro, they're both, they kind of help cleaning validation, but it's not really cleaning validation. It's really more disinfecting validation. So ATP, basically the gist of that is, every living thing, we run off ATP basically. So bacteria has ATP in it. And the idea is with a swab, if there is bacteria there, you'll swab it, but ATP will be on the swab and it reacts with an enzyme and basically gives off light. And there's a luminometer, which converts that light into a number. It basically gives you a rough number of what is on that surface. And it's not, I guess it is quantitative, but that 200 doesn't actually mean there's 200 microbes on the table. It's really arbitrary, but it's a really quick and dirty method that you can use kind of ongoing in your operations to get a good idea of what is on the surfaces and what you're dealing with in there. So a lot of our customers will use those maybe in process after rooms are done. You get an instant result that you can track on the cloud or whatnot. But again, as I said, it's quick and dirty. It's almost like measuring to the centimeter, whereas micro swabs, it doesn't lie. It's really measuring to the millimeter. You get a way better idea, a quantitative idea of what's there. And you can even tell, how much is there. You can also tell what's there as well. So if we kind of say you want to use them both in tandem. If you are using ATP for all your rooms, maybe once in a while, do a micro swab. It's almost like you're auditing your ATP to make sure that it's still working properly and you can trust that result.
And just before we go to the next slide, I just wanted to look at the Q&A, and there's a question there just about, you talked about Shield product having the activated hydrogen peroxide. What's the difference between your hydrogen peroxide and that of any other hydrogen peroxide out on the market?
Sure, yeah. So so it's this, like the actual hydrogen peroxide itself is the exact same. We might get like cosmetic grade or food grade, but in terms of the chemistry, it's the same. Where we are different is, so it's a patented formula. Hydrogen peroxide, again, has kind of always been known as a disinfectant, but it does have some weaknesses. By itself, it has weaknesses kind of with its stability. It's heavily impacted by environmental factors. It's not actually that good of a disinfectant by itself. It'll work, but it's not great. what we've done is if we've taken the hydrogen peroxide that isn't that stable, all those things that I just mentioned, and we found a way to stabilize it and really increase its efficacy pretty much like tenfold. So yeah, that's really what Virox, what we've done is we've created this many patents, but this kind of it's a technology. It's not the same, like we don't have the same formula in all of our products. It's a technology we're able to tweak and really develop products specifically for different industries. So for example, we have products in hospitals and their main concern is contact time. They want to make sure it's killed as soon as possible. They want to have like the highest claims you can get, as you can imagine. So we have products there. And then, for example, the Shield products, contact time isn't as important. It's important. You just want to have a realistic one, but you don't need a 1 minute contact time, for example. But what we saw you did need in cannabis was that cleaning efficacy. So the Shield formula is a much better cleaner than one that you'd find in a hospital, for example. So to answer your question, I guess it's a patented formula. What we've done is we've stabilized it, and then we've added some like organic acids to kind of help with the actual efficacy of it. And then lastly, we found a way to pair it with surfactants. I think it's anionic and cationic, which it's tough to have those together suspended, which helps it with that cleaning efficacy as well.
Thank you.
No worries. I think I just have one slide here. It's really just a couple kind of ending notes here. So, it's really important to choose a product that works well with your facility. There's been so many cases where we've seen customers, like there's one customer who was having weekly meetings of how they could stop using this one product, but they were just kind of changing their protocols and working with it. But you're not tied to using any product. You can always switch, and there's disinfectant manufacturers that are happy to help you switch. So don't just feel like you're stuck using a product that's not working. And also consider different application methods and any restrictions that may prevent use of certain products. So I really don't want to pick on any chemistry or product, but I'm going to say alcohol again, because I'm pretty sure almost everyone in the industry has or is using alcohol. You don't want to be spraying isopropyl alcohol, and if you are, you're going to have to implement a respirator program or some kind of engineering controls like HVAC. And if you're thinking about, let's say you're using Shield right now and you're spraying it, you're thinking about switching to isopropyl, you should really consider like, oh, we actually can't use isopropyl the same way we're using Shield. We're actually going to have to change our protocols. And then you can really see that rabbit hole you're about to get into there. So before making those switches, you want to consider all those things. And it might seem kind of obvious right now, but it gets overlooked sometimes because there is a lot of moving parts when you're switching products. Really, on that same note, switching products is not as easy as just substituting or control F-ing that product in your SOPs. You're gonna have to, you have to do some trials and see what works, what application works, kind of as a next point. You're gonna also want to have some kind of data to show Health Canada that you have looked into this product and you've approved it for whatever reason. Like we have data we can give you. A lot of the medium to larger size facilities, they want to plan a trial with ATP and micro so that they kind of have control. It's unbiased. So it's a really great way to do that. And then you'll uncover maybe some issues that you might not have uncovered until you kind of launched the product or made that switch. For example, spraying, where if you're spraying Shield, you're not going to have any respiratory irritation. If you were to switch products to like a chlorine or alcohol, you're going to instantly have an issue there, and you're going to have to change, and that's just going to be a little bit difficult. You want to think about those things ahead of time. Another one is you really do want to aim to have as few disinfectant products as possible in your facility, and that's really to avoid confusion. So, I actually had a call this morning with a customer who they had 5 different disinfectant, sanitizing cleaners, kind of all in one, and they had different protocols for their different rooms. And it's challenging enough, even if you're working there every day, to memorize 5 different dilution ratios, 5 different contact times, maybe 5 different protocols. And then a lot of facilities now too, they have part-time workers, or the turnovers are high. So you want to make sure your process is really easy to follow, and having that one product, and I'm not going to say one protocol, but a similar protocol involving that product, that makes things a lot easier for sure. So try to aim to have as few as possible. It's never a good thing to open up a safety or not like a closet, for example, and having 10 different products and half people in there don't even know what they are. You want everyone to be aware of the product they're using, understand it, and be comfortable with it. And then the last thing I wanted to kind of leave everyone with is, a good disinfectant does not have to be harmful to users. There's tons, Shield's obviously not harmful to users, but we're not the only one. There's tons of products out there that are just as good, if not better, disinfectants, and also safe for the users, the plants, the environment after you're done. It just seems to be almost like a fallacy where people, the most harmful disinfectant you can find, you want to use that because you think that it's actually killing more on the surface, but it doesn't have to be that way. And there's a lot of good resources out there to show you that different products that you can use, like Shield being one of them. So that is it for my presentation. I think I see some more questions up here, so I'm happy to answer those. And kind of as Ab said, we, through Grow House, we have donated some Shield product to the show, so you will see it around. We'll have a booth there too, so if you don't get to ask your question today, feel free to stop by. But I hope everyone really feels safe knowing that the show is being protected by this Shield product, the same technology that's used in about 90% of hospitals in North America, and you'll be safe visiting the show.
Great, thanks so much, Troy. That was incredibly informative. And I actually thought you were incredibly non-sales pitchy, which I seem to be coming across more as a.
If you're my sales guy now.
and I do it out of simplicity. I don't have any dog in Shield's fight. It just, as a QA, just makes my life easier. Mm. You've mentioned Grow House a little bit. In fact, I think George was actually supposed to do the hosting of this webinar, and unfortunately he couldn't. Do you want to just do a better shout out to John and George?
For sure. Yeah, John and George from Grow House. We partnered with them, so they're the exclusive distributor for Shield across Canada. But no, they're great to work with. They really built really a whole product or a whole catalog around Shield. So not just offering Shield, but having that ATP, your mops, buckets, nutrients, really anything, the picks and shovels, what I like to say, what you're using every day in your facility, plus all that support that comes behind it. So George Dickinson, if you haven't heard the name, pretty big name in the industry. He's famous for kind of designing a lot of greenhouses. He's kind of known as one of the light guys as well. But all of us, like myself with Grow House, we're here as a resource. So a lot of the times, kind of as I've said, we want to make it as easy as possible for you. So a lot of the times, if as a customer who's looking to go with Shield, we'll work with them. We'll help write the SOPs. We'll give them the ATP unit with the SOPs for that. Really personalize the approach for that customer, and we think that's one of our reasons for success as well.
And with that, are there other pieces? You've mentioned the ATP meter a few times, but any other pieces of equipment that kind of work really well with the Shield product, whether it's a fogger or mops or whatever? I assume Grow carries a lot of that as well.
Yeah, well, our dilution stations are great. So I say handheld, not handheld, but like you just turn a knob, it dilutes the product for you. And then what we have is test strips as well. So it's like a hot tub test strip. You get some of the solution in a bottle or whatever. You dip the strip, 30 seconds, it should change color. So then we've created like a logbook as well with that too. So if you're QA, every day you can go to this unit, you can check the pressure. If it's within spec, you give it a thumb or a check mark. And then, maybe once a week, you do that test strip. You can log it in the book, and we've got really great feedback from Health Canada, just going that extra step, showing that, if you're doing ATP, you're showing at the end of the process it's working, but also at the beginning of the process as well. So that's one thing that I would totally recommend anyone using concentrate to do. I think the other piece of equipment, which there's many different options, kind of ranging from $100 to thousands, is a foamer. Foaming is definitely superior to spraying for many reasons. I think one of the most obvious ones is that you can actually visually see where it's hit on the wall. So if you're spraying a wall or foaming a wall, you can see where you've hit, if there's anywhere you've missed. And then just like a spray, like a liquid application, is going to dry and they're good to go. So there's no extra steps with foaming. It actually ends up using a little bit less product as well, and it actually sticks to those surfaces that the liquid might roll down on. So Yeah, definitely. If you're choosing to use Shield, look at a foamer as well, because not all disinfectants can be foamed.
Right. So we sort of talked about it earlier about transitioning facilities into changing from their existing product line. Not to say that those products are going to be thrown away; they can be used in other manners. But um, what is the typical process that you with Shield would do in terms of making that transition for that facility? One of the questions in particular was, do you have any SOPs that help make that transition a little easier?
Yeah, we definitely have SOPs. Really, the process is it kind of varies on the customer we're working with and the level of assistance they want. Like, in terms of the amount that we offer. So maybe I'll kind of look at one of the ones where we provided like a lot more support for with one customer. So kind of the first thing we want to do is talk to QA. We have a really great, we call it a QA package, but it's everything QA usually is looking for, like our Health Canada approval letters, SDS. Really, it's a huge list. We have like a vendor audit form that we've done. So that's kind of the first step. And then, usually we want to come in there, either do a demo or plan a trial. And we really like to have ATP and micro for that, not just one or the other. Get that data. And once you see the data, it kind of makes the change a little bit easier and makes everyone kind of feel more comfortable. But we don't want to, one thing we don't do is we can, but we prefer not to just change your entire facility all at once, especially if it's a large facility. So in this example I'm talking about, we did a kind of a slower approach. So their main concern was tables. So we addressed the tables, wrote the SOPs, and then it was, okay, let's look at floors and walls. There are trials there. And that was a really good approach because if you can imagine being in a facility and on Monday you've changed everything, it's shocking, and you might be going against it a little bit. Whereas, it's a slower approach. I'm in there a lot, talking to that end user, asking them questions. Is this working? And that's really the way we like to do it. And then, once, let's say you've done this new protocol, everyone's happy and signed off, then it's okay, QA, let's work together on these SOPs. Maybe on the flip side, if you're like a new entrant in the industry, you don't have SOPs, we do have kind of template ones that we can work up with you on, and kind of scope out what you'd be doing in your facility before you've actually done it.
But question on how does Shield work in like a low volume mister or in a fogger?
Yeah. So right now, just with the way Health Canada does it, it is kind of a gray area. Fogging, Mister is definitely a little bit less of a gray area, but really with Health Canada, fogging, they want to make sure that you can fog as long as the surface has been properly, at minimum, cleaned. Because when you're fogging, you're not really getting, the surface isn't getting that saturated. And if you're using a product that's a two-step product, you still need to pre-clean that surface regardless. So Health Canada really just doesn't want anyone to rely on fogging as like their only line of defense. So if you are going to go into that room and clean every surface before fogging, our argument is you might as well use Shield, because in the act of cleaning and disinfecting, or in the act of cleaning, you are also disinfecting. And if you want to go back and do a fog after that, you can. It's an extra step. And we have, I think probably 4 or 5 customers of ours that use our product as their only line of defense, and they do not irradiate. And they don't fog, and then they don't have to irradiate after. So I think that's really all the evidence we need to show that it's not necessary. We have others that do fog and they don't need to irradiate, and that's fine as well. It's really, if you think that fogging will help you sleep at night, and you can't think about like leaving the place without fogging, then just do the fog. As long as you're following the protocol before, Health Canada will have an issue with it. It's really just, if it's 5 o'clock and you're like, oh, I forgot to clean that room, and you throw a fogger in there and run out, then that's going to run into issues because you're really not properly disinfecting or cleaning.
So your best approach is probably to use a foamer.
Yeah.
There's another question there posted around electrochemically activated water, and just what's the compatibility between electrochemically activated water and Shield?
So you never want to mix two disinfectant products or two chemicals in general. We have done one trial with an LP that all of their water was being sterilized or disinfected with the ECA water that you're talking about, and at that very low level, that was, I think it was maybe safe for drinking. It was safe to give to the plants. That was okay, but I wouldn't be mixing anything else with Shield. But if you're just worried maybe about surface residues or whatnot, there won't be any issues there at all. But yeah, definitely you do not want to be mixing two disinfectant chemicals or two chemicals in general.
I don't see any other questions, but I've got a few.
Yeah, let's do it.
One would be, of course, we work with a lot of people in living soils, living soil beds, or many of them are trying to be organic, whether they choose to get certified or not. Where does Shield kind of fit into that realm?
So on label, our products are not organic, but that doesn't mean that an organic grower can't use them. So it sounds like a runaround answer there. But so basically what we've done is, so the process of getting approved for organic is, I think, 1 to 2 years. And we're confident we can do that, but we've worked with a few LPs that are organic and are using our product, and really showing that regulator that, hey, here's the product we're doing. So I guess to take a step back, the first thing we want to understand is, when you're approving an organic product, like, what is the concern for you? And when it came to disinfectants, really their concern was, we don't want it to impact the product, obviously, but also the environment once you're done. So we were able to show them that, hey, like, this is the way they plan to use our product. It's not touching the product, it's not touching the cannabis or the end product there, and the disposal is safe, it's readily biodegradable, all this. So with that, they gave that producer approval. So if you are an organic producer and you'd like to use Shield, we can definitely work with you and show them the evidence that, like we've done with many others, to show in this case you can use it. And we are working to kind of get that seal of approval from a couple of them out there, but it's a couple year progress.
Okay, thanks. I guess another question. Right now one of the buzz topics is the hop latent viroid, and you were making some comments around viruses as well as perhaps non-enveloped viruses, including viroids. Can you share a little bit about where you think Shield might fit into addressing some of the concerns we have right now with hop latent?
Sure. Yeah. So right now, I kind of touched on GLP earlier too. So Health Canada has really strict protocols in which you can test disinfectants on viruses, bacteria. So currently there's actually no protocol to test for hop latent viroid because it can't be cultured in the lab. So right off the bat, right there, no disinfectant can fully claim against hop latent viroid. But as I showed earlier, there's that hierarchy of susceptibility, where we do have that broad spectrum virucidal claim, where we would expect efficacy against hop latent viroid. That's really where we are now. But another thing to consider too is, it's a virus and it's in the genetics. So if you have an outbreak in your facility, a disinfectant isn't going to help. It's like kind of the joke we said. It's like what Trump said about drinking bleach once you have COVID to get rid of it. Like, if your mother plants have hop latent viroid, no matter how much disinfectant you use on the surfaces, all your clones are going to have it too. So, we're very confident that if, let's say, you have a clean genetics and then contaminated, and you were to snip with the contaminated ones and go to the clean, it can transfer that way, and that is definitely somewhere where Shield can be used. But if it's in all your mother plants, you're not really doing anything with the disinfectant. So that's something that we're trying to kind of show producers the question really is just like, does it kill it? And it's like, it probably does, but your disinfectant shouldn't be your concern at this point. You should really be looking at your genetics, where you're getting them, and if you can possibly clean them up.
Although it is amazing when you really do have an incredibly clean facility, how that does translate to greater successes in something as simple as even cloning.
Yeah.
You can actually increase your cloning success by just having, whether it's having clean drip lines or just clean snips, all of these things really make a impact on things like really the vigor of that plant.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's really about creating that culture inside the facility where everyone knows the impact they're making and the importance of their job. And a lot of the customers we've seen be successful in terms of their sanitation biosecurity program. They're the ones where everyone in the facility knows exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it.
So I fouled up the question on the ECA. I think the participant really wanted to know, is ECA comparable to Shield? Can they be used interchangeably to deliver the same type of efficacy around sanitation?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. You're asking me if my product's better than a competitor. I'm obviously going to say yes. Even if I did not work for Virox, I would still I've seen the ECA. The Shield or the AHP technology is really superior. There's a lot of different kind of ECA products out there, different dilution ratios that kind of change the way you use it. So already, like, just the amount of variability there with the dilution ratios kind of makes it a little bit more complex. But the contact time of Shield, the OneStep, the fact that it's actually approved specifically for use in cannabis, those are all reasons. Like, the contact time is much shorter. It is a OneStep. Those two reasons right there, we've been kind of kicking it out of a lot of facilities. But again, there are still some unique scenarios where ECA might be the product of choice, and one of them would be kind of water disinfection, where Shield, we cannot disinfect water. We're strictly a surface disinfectant. ECA is something I'd recommend for water disinfection. If you're in a remote area and you're using well water, it's a good thing to do.
I think the last question is from on my own part. We talked a lot about cultivation. We focused about grow rooms and whatnot. Can you tell me where Shield might be beneficial in the post-harvest, as well as perhaps even in the trimming, curing, going on even into extraction? Do you see a lot of play in for Shield there?
For sure, yeah. We have tons of just even extract-only customers. So yeah, when it comes to actually like removing those resins, especially like post-extraction resins, like a piece of glassware it's just caked on. Most like Shield, if you let it sit for 10 minutes, it's gonna make it easier. But isopropyl alcohol or some other solvents like that, sometimes those are the best option to actually remove that resin. Then a lot of times we'll see a soak in Shield, for example, for 5 minutes, then a rinse, then it's good to go. So Shield is maybe not as applicable for the OneStep product in those areas, but it still is a disinfectant. It still is really good at some of the less soiled surfaces. So for example, Mobius has actually recommended our product for use on their trimming machines for everything except for one area, which is the hopper that has that guitar string type. Yeah, and we did testing with them and we determined that you could get it off, but it's going to take you a little bit more time than isopropyl. So what they have is, hey, use your solvent or isopropyl to remove it, and then you can still use a wipe to quickly disinfect the Shield and have it good to go. So I think, to answer your question a little bit quicker here, I think it's the cleaning aspect of Shield is less applicable when it comes to post-harvest, but the disinfectant aspect is still just as important.
And you'd still have to rinse that off, though.
Of course, if it's cannabis contact, for sure, yes.
Wanted to bring that out. That's great. I'm sure you work with more than just Mobius, although we love the Mobius trimmer, but other trimmers work really well in your...
For sure, yeah. Mobius is just one that we've worked with them for probably like 3 years now, and we've flown out to their facility in BC and done tons of trials. We are also working with Twister, some of the other ones a little bit more closely as well, but it's really focused on that compatibility side of things, where there's just so much different parts on there of different like plastics, rubbers, metals, and really having one product is really tough. The fact that Shield was able to basically be approved for 90%, they were really happy with that. And previously they were using isopropyl, and it was kind of some of the gaskets and like the seals were wearing down. So it's helped to kind of elongate their product life.
Well, thanks so much. I see some of the comments, just making sure that They were thanking you for a very informative presentation. Look forward to seeing you in Niagara Falls unless you come out east earlier.
Hope so.
And I just want to remind you and remind our viewers that if you liked what you saw, get out there, check out the Grow Up Conference Awards. I believe today is the last day to do your voting, and hopefully come out and see us in 2 months' time. Thanks again, Troy.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care, everyone.